Good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So we can go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Committee Chair Ashley Esposito. I would like to welcome you all to the December 22nd, 2025 Policy Committee meeting. If you have not done so, please mute your phone, and anyone who does not mute their phone may be muted by the call moderator or removed from the call. Additionally, please turn off your video if you are not a board member, the CEO, or her staff. I will now read a roll call of the board members to identify who's present. Please identify yourself first before speaking on the record. Chair Sally. Commissioner Ames Messenger. Commissioner Kenyatta Bay. Commissioner Redding Lallinger.
Present.
Welcome. Commissioner Chicas Guzman. And I am present.
I think I see Commissioner Chicas Guzman on. I don't think she's able to respond right now, but she is on.
Okay. Oh, yes, I see her. And then I see Commissioner Ames Messenger. Welcome.
Hello. Sorry about that.
No problem. Oh, so for public comment, members of the public who would like to provide public comment to this committee can do so by signing up the day before the meeting. Up to 5 individuals will be given the opportunity to provide written or pre-recorded testimony. Speakers will be granted 3 minutes, and all public comment should address the policy related issues. Individuals and groups interested in providing comment can do so by signing up one of 3 ways. You can email public.comment@bcps.k12.md.us. You can call the board office at 443-642-4095, or you can visit the board office at 200 East North Avenue, the Alice G. Pinderhughes Building at room 406. For more information regarding the policy committee and the other committees, please visit the board section on the City Schools website at www.baltimorecity.schools.org, and you can go into the policy section to find us. Please remember that you can provide your feedback for City Schools policies and anything that's on our policy calendar through our policy feedback form. The form can be found at our City Schools website under board policies. And finally, the chat function for this virtual meeting will not be used as a tool to gather feedback or answering questions from public comment. If you have follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to us anytime at schoolboard@bcps.k12.md.us, and the board staff will provide a response to you. So let's get started. Up first, we have, we will be receiving a presentation on JFC and JFC-RA intra-district student transfer policy.
Sure. Good afternoon.
Good
I
afternoon.
am Brandon Tillman. I am the Director of Enrollment, Choice, and Transfer. I am joined here by several colleagues. We're going to be presenting JFC, which is the intra-district transfer policy, combined with EEA, which is our student transportation services. So this is just a framing discussion, but we will get started on some of the transfer pieces. So again, like we said, today we're presenting 2 policies, JFC and EEA. They intersect daily. As we know, transportation and our mobility in our district reflects the lived experiences of our students and our families. So the sequencing of today's agenda is intentional. As we know, there's a direct correlation. So for our board priority, just to revisit, we know that transfers and transportation touches many different strategic priorities of the board, but most notably they target priority 5 and priority 7, which highlights equity and access, family engagement, and operational sustainability. So again, why are we presenting these together? Because we know student mobility and our transportation services are inseparable. Any change to how students will move across the district definitely will have an impact on how we design, deliver, and fund transportation services. I do want to note that for nearly 2 decades, Baltimore City Public Schools has honored a practice that respects a family's choice to move responsibly. And we are committed to maintaining that tradition while ensuring that the system can support these movements safely and effectively. So as a recap, our intra-district student transfer policy, it basically details how students can request and receive transfers within Baltimore City Public Schools. At its core, it seeks to really balance families' needs with system-wide capacity, equity, and our operational realities. So again, the policy outlines who can receive a transfer, what documentation is required, how those requests will be reviewed, when they can occur, and under what circumstances our exceptions will be granted. We do have several related board policies as we think about transfers that are listed on the screen, from JFA, JFB, JFBB, JFE, and of course our EA, which we will detail a little bit more later in this presentation. To dive in, again, we talked about JFC, how it outlines how students can move from one city school placement to another. So this policy is focused directly on moving from one district school to another district school. It certainly goes into detail about the different types of transfers. So when we think about zone transfers, which is kind of the neighborhood school that is closest to a family's residence, it talks about those outer district transfers, outer zone transfers that requires approval from one of the central enrollment offices, our documentation that is aligned with MSDE about verified eligibility, residency, proof of student age, and proof of parent and guardian identity. It clarifies when we can deny certain requests, and also kind of just overall expectations around attendance while folks are reviewing the transfer request. Some other things that JFC goes into detail about are our transfer windows of the district, our grade level limits, what are the exceptions to some of our transfer rules. And again, it kind of highlights the different types of transfers and the exceptions that can be made. So clarifying items around safety-based transfers, administrative transfers, steps that we take in court-ordered transfers, as well as for transfers for students that are seeking specialized or citywide programming. So a couple of things, again, as we think about inter-district transfer, just want to highlight that this is referring to students that are moving from one city school placement to another. We know that families request transfers for many reasons. They can be for changes in residence, they can be for safety concerns, changing of family circumstances, transportation limitations, and a myriad of other things. Again, students can always return to their zone school without central office approval. There are five other central office enrollment teams that do support this work of this enrollment transfer ecosystem. And we always try to make our transfer decisions and let them be guided by what is in the best interest of the student. So this slide gives a little bit just overview of our numbers. As you can see on the screen, we have 10,156 students that transferred to another school. So this represents about 13.2% of our overall total student enrollment. So we see that definitely it illustrates the scale of student mobility that we are experiencing in our system. And when we kind of look at this number, we can see the student movement is constant. Certainly is significant and again, multifaceted. So these are kind of the key factors
I'll turn it off, and I'll turn it off on my.
These are the key factors that we have wanted to highlight in terms of illustrating kind of that our additional mobility reflects complex realities that our families are facing. We know here in Baltimore, we have high residential mobility across the city. We know that we have a transportation infrastructure that can be challenging at times. We do know that we have safety concerns that are in and around school communities. We do have reassignments that are following some behavioral challenges. Of course, childcare hardships and family logistics are always a key factor. We have court mandated and agency directed transfers. We have a number of students that are overage and unaccredited that are seeking to re-engage. And then always our administrative transfer requests by school leaders to really give children a second chance to come in first place. Probably our largest category that we're going to see is kind of our summer transfer requests following our school choice results. That is an 8-week period every summer in which we are supporting families in the boardroom of their requests to maybe choose a different school community for whatever reason they are presenting. So this slide here just kind of highlights some of the implications, some of the barriers, some of the opportunities that we have. Again, when we think about student mobility and how we navigate that, we do know sometimes it causes some instability in our enrollment numbers and then overall school-based staffing. It can also lead to some interrupted learning environments and the strain on climate and culture that school leaders are working to build. It can also have an impact on our neighborhood schools, our neighborhood zone schools, and then just the overall disruption that it can cause to kind of transportation and kind of those budgetary connections with that. Some of the barriers that we have, again, when we think about just the mobility, again, we know that we have in Baltimore, we have MTA dependent travel, which is not ideal for our students, certainly high residential instability. We have a decentralized enrollment structure plus school-based enrollment. So like I said, we have 6 enrollment teams here, but also each of our zone schools in the field across our portfolio can do enrollment. Again, we have complex safety and climate dynamics of being in an urban environment. And then just this long-standing culture of a flexible movement presents some barriers. But I do want to highlight that we have taken some opportunities as an enrollment ecosystem to contend with some of these barriers and implications that we have. Certainly, we have embarked upon a multi-phase, multi-year collaboration with the continuous improvement to just reimagine enrollment and transfers throughout the district. We recently launched a unified student enrollment management system with the hope of, this year on our phase 3 of connecting all of the different enrollment teams. So we're all utilizing the same system and a unified process. We've reduced the number of open transfer windows to limit the disruption that we have mid-year and throughout the year going into schools and things of that nature. And then certainly we have partnered with our student wholeness team to really kind of assign what we are calling transfer ambassadors to kind of support our students as they are navigating into those new learning environments. Yeah, I went through quickly because I know I'm on a time limit and we have 2 policies. But one of the things that we do want to highlight are just some framing questions that we wanted to present to the board to think about. One is really looking at kind of the policy direction as we think about some of the things that we presented, which really is asking, is the current level of mobility still appropriate? The second question is really around kind of the operational sustainability element of if maintained, if we feel that this degree of mobility is appropriate, how do we ensure that transportation remains manageable and equitable? And then the third just kind of looks at academic programming. Does the current academic landscape really support stability or drive this element of transfers? We can certainly come back at the end, but I wanted to just pose those 3 questions as we are just thinking and moving forward with around this element of transfer. We do have another slide that takes into some other revisions that we are looking to put in place. One is, again, kind of looking at clear parameters around our transfers, updating language to align with kind of current realities. And then the biggest is really looking at parent and guardian behavior and thinking about whether parent and guardian behavior can or should result in administrative transfer for a student. So that's kind of the final question. But I will turn it over to Jacinta to talk about EEA, and then we'll come back and look at it in its totality.
Good afternoon. My name is Jacinta Hughes. I serve in the role as the Senior Transportation Director. I'm speaking about Board Policy EAA, which governs how we transport students to and from school daily. Next slide. Who are the students that we normally transport? We transport students that are eligible for transportation as a related service. Most of our students are IEP, 504 students, McKinney-Vento, and K through 5 students who walk more than who are at a zone school, but their residential address is more than a mile. Next slide. This was our transportation data as of October 2025. Currently, we were transporting about 5,660 students. Right now, we're up to about 5,993 students. So the data, the numbers move a lot. And so with that, we are providing services by yellow buses, vans, a few taxis. We are currently 80% contracted out, and 20% of our in-house staff transport students on a daily basis. Next slide. Many of you have seen this slide several times. This is basically the breakdown of how we do the types of transportation we provide. MTA, which approximately 27,000 students are eligible for MTA between the 6th grade through the 12th grade. Corner to corner, curb to curb, swing space. We currently only have one school that's eligible for transportation in swing space right now, as well as the buses also supporting any extracurricular activities and events scheduled at the school level. Next slide. Some of our challenges to providing and expanding services. We provide services based on student demand for transportation. Some of the industry-wide pressures that are still present are the driver shortages. We have been able to maintain drivers based on our driver training program that we have implemented successfully. Another thing is a lot of our students move a lot, which creates the need to continuously update transportation services. Our contractors cost raised about 31% over the past year, and it's a continuous escalating factor in the contract, which limits our ability for the resources that we have available to transport students. And one of our biggest challenges every day are driver call-outs. There is no substitute pool, and so oftentimes when there are driver call-outs, buses are combined, so students may arrive late, or students will not have that service for that day. Next slide. So some of our framing questions that we'd like to present to reflect and update the MTA policies. Right now, we don't have a memorandum, but we're working on it, in which we will outline in detail our responsibility as well as MTA responsibility to the students. We are trying to look at a parent reimbursement stipend program in which parents would be able to opt in to provide transportation for their students, and we would reimburse them for transporting their students, and add language that identifies ride with siblings. It has been a practice that we allow siblings to ride with students as a related service, but due to the growing numbers or demand for students who are eligible for transportation, we haven't been able to provide. So we'd like to update the policy to include the change from being able to assist families in that way. Next slide. So we also looking for your input on when a child is assigned a school outside their zone, it could impact transportation. So limiting the school assignment to contain our costs as well as the service, be able to provide the service. Should transportation eligibility be centralized rather than handled at the school level? And given the rising cost of transportation, should city schools explore increasing the distance threshold for transportation eligibility? Next slide.
Okay, so as we think about both policies, kind of our next steps are to really look at other peer school systems and to see what's working best for them and to see how that aligns with the work that we have going on with transfers and transportation here in Baltimore City, to connect with our different offices and other stakeholders here, both internal and external, to begin kind of that stakeholder engagement session and to kind of think about some of those questions that we've identified throughout this discussion. As we think about kind of, again, dates of that stuff, we can go to the next slide. We're thankful because we have somewhat of a runway. Certainly, we will return in front of you in March for the initial presentation of the actual revisions after we've kind of done that research and connected with those different stakeholders that we've identified. First reader is presented in May, and our second reader is presented in July. But certainly in the interim, we certainly welcome any guidance or feedback from the board on some of those large adaptive questions that we presented for both JFC and EEA in terms of just framing and the direction forward. But other than that, that kind of concludes kind of our framing conversation for where we want to go with both policies, JFC and EEA.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. I'll open it up to the other commissioners for questions.
I have some questions. I'm happy to go first, unless other board commissioners would like to hop in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. Director Tillman, first of all, thank you for the presentation. I'm glad you all are thinking about this, and I'm glad that it's a data-driven process. I have to say, I'm shocked by the number of students who are transferring to other schools within our district. I mean, 10,156 within one school year is a huge number, and I can't think to put it any other way than that is highly disruptive for everybody involved. A couple questions and then a couple thoughts. Number one, does this include transfers to charter? Is the charter data included in this data?
Yes,
Okay.
it would be included.
Okay, thank you. And then, the charter piece is interesting to me, and I'm curious if you've put some thought to this, because the state is in the midst of passing a charter regulation that would require all of the charter schools to have a centralized enrollment process. It seems to me that if all the charters are going to be under one enrollment process, that there's an opportunity here for us to have a unified enrollment process across the entire system. Are those conversations that you all have entertained or had? Have you had any conversations with leaders of some of the charter networks in our city to see how they might feel about that? I know all of this is quite fresh, but it's such a big undertaking that if we were to go in that direction, we'd need to, start planning very early. So just curious, have you had any conversations? Do you have any thoughts about that, what it would take, what the benefits would be, and what some of the drawbacks might be?
So actually, we've started some internal conversation just amongst some of the leadership of the various offices, central enrollment offices here, about what that would look like, kind of our system readiness and the capability of our system to take that on. Really looking at our new enrollment management system and thinking about what enhancements that we may need to make to that if the legislation was to pass. We have not yet had any external conversations. Again, this is somewhat new, so just kind of been on our radar, kind of maybe the last 4 to 6 weeks. But certainly we were beginning those conversations now and just looking at from a procedural element, from a financial element, what that would all entail.
Okay, so still early.
Still early, very early.
Okay, all right. My second question is, and this is in trying to sort of be helpful and think about the framing questions that you put on there. I feel like I'm lacking some of the data I would need to really be able to give any kind of valuable input. So my question here is, on this slide that you have here, slide 10, about the key factors driving transfers within city schools. Do you have a sense for, or do you have the numbers around which of these factors, are these in order of the most frequent? Do we have more detailed data that tells me? I mean, I saw you called out administrative transfer specifically, but is that a bigger problem than everything else? I'm just trying to understand like a second layer of the data, if you will, to better understand, it's a huge number overall. And I'm guessing that there's significant variability in different root causes here. So do you have more data that gets more specific than this?
Sure. So certainly we can follow up with kind of the detailed data that we do have. I do want to be very transparent and highlight we have 6 different offices across our ecosystem. So certainly, right now we're working towards having a unified data system, but certainly our Office of Enrollment Choice and Transfer, we can certainly give you the data for the transactions that come out of this particular office that would take you through some of those detailed elements. I'm also going to say right now our reporting structure as a system is aligned to kind of MSDE standards. So some of the data that is presented is coded in that manner and not necessarily in the manner that gets all the way to the granular detail. But for the things that are mentioned, we can certainly follow back up and provide you with that detail to kind of make some informed decisions or informed responses around the questions.
I appreciate that. And I would love the data, but it's less important that I have the data than I feel that you all have the data, right? I think you're trying to answer this question, which I think is a good one, that I think we would have almost unanimous agreement that this is not healthy for a system to have 13.4% of its kids finding a new school within one school year. I don't think that serves anybody well. We want to offer choice. We want people the opportunity to make new choices, and there are extenuating circumstances, as you've indicated. But this number is huge. So I think we all agree we want the number to come down. I think all I'm saying and where I'm trying to push is, the best solutions are directly linked to the root causes and their magnitude. So I would love more data, but more important than me, I just would love us to have a better picture for what are the biggest things driving these. And some of them, I think some of us are more amenable to letting continue than others, right? Certainly, if there's a safety issue, I think we're probably pretty aligned that we should prioritize student safety, and if a student needs to move. Now, you bring up the administrative transfer. I'm sure some are more worthy than others. So how do we define that? So it's more of a comment than it is I guess I'm unprepared to give any input on how we bring this number down without understanding the key drivers a little bit more. That's sort of my feedback at this point for that particular question.
Noted and understood. What I will say is one of the things, certainly we can respond about administrative transfers as an example of some of the safety transfers that are processed at central office. I'm also going to say sometimes having our decentralized enrollment system limits our ability to report in data. So for instance, certainly if a child has a safety issue and they are returning to their zone school, that gets coded according to MSDE standards and not, I'm going to say, tracked in a way that we would track it if it was coded here. So for some of the data elements, just the way in which we have a lot of doors as it relates to enrollment, probably more so than some of our other peer districts. And that presents just a slight challenge in kind of reporting the data out in a way that represents all movement, but certainly we can definitely get those better data on those things that have been tracked and have been processed by one of the central office enrollment teams. No problem.
I appreciate that. And listen, some of this maybe is feedback for the future, right? Like certainly there are things we have to report to MSDE, and we can be smart about the data that we need to collect for our own internal processes. So some of this might be reviewing, what do we make a zone school fill out and ask, what do they ask the parent when they come in to come back to their zone school? What data, would be helpful for us to understand that they then submit to us that may not go to MSDE, but will help us get smarter about some of these things. So maybe that's part of the feedback too, is just considering how we collect the kind of data that we need without it being too high of an administrative burden on folks in the system.
Exactly. Noted.
That's it for me. I have a lot of thoughts on transportation, Jacinta, and I appreciate it, but I'm gonna hold. I know we've engaged in other venues, So I'm not going to ask any questions today, but I appreciate you bringing this up. I think these things are highly linked, obviously, the choice in the system and and the transportation. And we have a lot of varied needs here. I continue to get sticker shock at the number. $46 million to transport, north of 5,000 students is a lot of money, but I understand why, because there's a lot of specialized needs. It's spread out across the whole district. There's a lot of things going on, but it is certainly some sticker shock. But anyway, I don't have any specific questions on the transportation for now. I'm going to yield to other commissioners if they have questions on either of these two pieces. Thank you both for the presentation.
And this
Thank
is
you.
this is Chief Ike Hubbard. Quickly, I just want to also answer Commissioner Lallinger's question. We are bringing this back, right, for first reader. So certainly what we can do is make sure the data we do have already, right, we bring back a first reader to be more specific about which transfers are sort of having the heaviest burden on that 10,000 number. And then we will also take into account your suggestions for how we should track data moving forward. We will have some of that to share, obviously, as we come back for first reader. But thank you for your considerations.
Thank you for taking it so seriously. I appreciate it.
I have Chair Esposito. Can I
Yep,
add
yep.
a quick question?
Sure.
Specifically looking at those 10,000 students, and also thank you again for having this conversation. We had a similar conversation this morning in operations. So it's good to see you again. Looking at also the number of those transfers that are distinct students. And so looking at like if you have one child that is being transferred 3 times within a district, or also looking at getting a sense of this data longitudinally year over year, is like, if there a way to go kind of those high flyers of students who have transferred every year for 4 years, which, is taking forward from one child that has stayed in one place. So getting a pattern within those schools, just as we think about school portfolio, school choices, about kind of where we are going as a district in the next 10 years. That would be helpful.
Noted. Understood.
And I have some comments and questions specifically about students with disabilities. I saw that safety concerns was on the list. So I'm really trying to understand if the differences in student supports that vary by school, like are students transferring because they're looking for a school that fits their needs? Because I feel like that's not necessarily clear when people are going through the school choice process. And then when it comes to the entrance criteria schools, I noticed that they have a very low population of students with disabilities compared to other high schools. So like with that information, I guess I'm asking if there's a way that we can collect feedback from families and students with disabilities who went through the school choice process and realized that it was not a good fit. And then I think it would also give us clarity about which schools are serving students with disabilities. And also for the group of students with disabilities, how many of those transfer requests are related to bullying, specifically of that population? And then separate from that, I would just be curious to know of the average number of occurrences of transfers for high school students that ultimately end up dropping out. And I noticed like on one of the slides, it said something about a transfer being initiated by a school leader if there was conflict with the parents. And just, especially when it comes to students with disabilities and, parent advocates, that can be very sensitive. And definitely, it can escalate into like legal matters and things like that. So yeah, I think that's important information to also know of the reasons where a principal is saying, I want the student to transfer and this family to transfer because there's conflict, how much of that conflict was related to students with disabilities. Um, and then the last thing that I have is when it comes to say you're I actually have like a scenario where someone recently reached out. They had just moved to the state mid-year and I believe they went to the district and then they were assigned a school, but are trying to figure out how to get into their zone school. So with this new transfer and enrollment system, is it possible for you all to know real time how many seats are available at a school so that their zone school is a priority? Because I'm trying to help them navigate that now and find out if their neighborhood school has seats, because that would be preferred, because like transportation wise, family support, they have very like specific circumstances that make it very challenging to get to the school that they're assigned to, and they're an elementary school and they don't qualify for our transportation. So yeah, those are some thoughts and questions that I have.
And certainly we will follow up with the data that's requested. What I will always say is for our neighborhood schools, that is always our default placement for our students. And certainly we can maybe connect offline and we can certainly figure out how we can best support the child in question with the last scenario. But that's always our default placement, unless there are
And Brandon,
extenuating
if I could,
circumstances.
yeah, I want to add to that, Brandon, just really, really very clearly, Commissioner Esposito, if a child is zoned to a school, they have a seat at that school per our policy. So I'd be really interested to have you send that family or that information over to the Office of Enrollment Choice and Transfer. Now, if it's a question of a student with a disability and there's a specialized program or service or something, that could be what's happening, but without sort of discussing one family here, I just want to be clear
Right,
that
right.
we don't put moratoriums on enrollment for zoned kids unless there is an egregious situation where we just cannot simply take kids, right? Brandon and I do this all the time. We walk schools and look to see where seats are and space and that kind of thing. But our current policy does state that if you are zoned to a school, you have an automatic seat there. So I would really be interested in more information. And then just to add one more question to your question and back to the other commissioners, this notion of can you offer a transfer for a student due to parent behavior? We are actually talking about really egregious parent behavior, not conflict. But we have had many principals ask us to transfer a student because the parent has become violent or has become really challenging. We've had principals seek peace orders against parents, some things like that that you all should be aware of. And our current policy only allows a student to be transferred due to student behavior or student concerns. And so we are in a catch-22 and really would like the board's feedback on should we change this policy as we bring it forward to you to allow schools to request due to egregious behavior. I don't mean I don't like you, we had a little conflict. We're talking about documented egregious behavior that would allow a student to be transferred due to parent behavior in addition
Mhm.
to some of the things that students have done at school. So, we're wrestling with that one. I heard Commissioner Mohammed actually mention that recently at a board meeting. And so it's something that we are struggling with. And we'd love to have feedback on that, either written or now or later, before we come back for first reader to make the right proposal for this policy.
Yeah, and I know in other meetings too, we've talked about, or it's come up that school leaders requesting a parent's code of conduct. So, yeah.
We actually have that. It's called a visitor code of conduct, which applies to parents or anybody coming into the school. And we definitely have that. And we've been doing training recently with all principals on that and how you utilize that. And, first and foremost, let's start with de-escalating the conflict, right? But then moving forward in a different way. And then when those things do not work, what does that look like? So I know that uh, Carl Perry from Pizzazz presented on that recently, and Chief Sivan sent it to him in the middle of the meeting, sharing our code of conduct. So it's about socializing it with parents. We're putting posters in all of our schools that demonstrate the conduct and what is allowable and what isn't. So then you can directly, respond to that when a parent has violated that. And I will say we're also working with a work group internally, including Chief Shorter, because there may be times, unfortunately, not the norm, but the exception, where a parent might need to be arrested, unfortunately. And that's something we have to contend with as well. If there is a situation that is causing harm or threat of harm, physical harm to people in the building.
Yeah, thank you for that context. Any other questions? And I can also send you the questions that I asked for regarding like data too, if that's helpful.
Okay, thank you.
I was just going to chime in quickly and say I appreciate that you all are thinking about the parent transfer situation. I will refrain from putting an opinion out there until I acquaint myself with the policy, because I'm very curious about mechanisms to hold parents accountable to those things. And I think that's directly related to whether or not we would then consider, because there's a way in which transfer just sort of potentially exports an issue to another,
Yeah.
school or school leader. I think for me, it's more about, does it offer an opportunity for a fresh start for a student and a family, and in a new environment. But anyway, I look forward to looking at that. I'm glad you called attention to the parent code of conduct. I'm looking forward to reading that and seeing what the mechanisms for accountability are there, before we take that up some more. But glad you all are thinking about that.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions that we have on that one. And next we have policy JLCDB, anaphylaxis identification and treatment in schools.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Courtney Pate, Bridge Director here over at the Office of Health and Specialized Student Services, and I will be presenting the updates on JLCDB. Sarita or Caitlin, do one of you have slides?
I can pull it. Hold on. Sorry, it was a lot of different files. Found it. Hold on.
No worries.
Awesome, thank you. So policy JLCDB is our policy on anaphylactic allergies and our response to anaphylactic allergies. Next slide, please. This policy is in alignment with board priority 4. Next slide, please. So for this short presentation, I'll discuss the current board policy, the proposed revisions, as well as engagement and a timeline for making these revisions. So the key features of board policy JLCDB is that it's related to the administration of epinephrine. It outlines the procedures for identification, management, and treatment of students who have anaphylactic allergies in school. It also outlines the components and includes the allergy and anaphylaxis action plan, as well as the rules around documentation of 911 calls. Next slide, please. We currently at city schools receive our epinephrine from a program called Epi for Schools. This epinephrine is provided to city schools free of charge. School staff are then trained on how to administer epinephrine to students who have been identified as those who have anaphylactic reaction to an allergy. The stock is supplied to us directly by the health department, only because EPIs for Schools does not allow more than one organization within the jurisdiction to get the epinephrine from them. And it has just been our common practice that the health department orders it and then distributes it to us. Next slide, please. Why is this policy being revised? In August of 2024, the federal guidance and state law changed regarding what is considered emergency epinephrine. They have now approved a medication called Neffy, which is an epinephrine nasal spray that is used for anaphylactic reaction for students who are at least 66 pounds and above. So following the FDA approval of this medication, Maryland law was updated to include nasal epinephrine and other FDA-approved devices beyond just the EpiPen in the school setting. Next slide, please. So the proposed revisions are to replace the term auto-injectable epinephrine with emergency use epinephrine because it would cover without whichever form is present at the time. Broaden the definition of emergency use epinephrine to refer to a portable disposable drug delivery service or product approved by the FDA that contains a pre-measured single dose of epinephrine that is used to treat anaphylaxis in emergency situations. And these changes reflect the updated Maryland law. Next slide. How will this proposed revision impact school health suites? So the nasal epinephrine will not be our primary source for epinephrine for all students in general. That will still be the auto-injectable. However, if a family has acquired the Neffy nasal epinephrine from their child's doctor and wants it utilized in school, then both the school health nurse and school health aide will be trained on the administration of that medication, as well as train whatever other school staff interact with that student who have been identified as emergency responders at that school. So the nasal epinephrine is administered in the same way as Narcan or glucagon or Valtoco, which is used for seizures. So it is not a new concept for school personnel to be trained on how to do it. It's just another form of having a nasal administered medication in school. Next slide. So some of the ongoing work, Food and Nutrition Services and the Office of Health and Specialized Student Services are collaborating to confirm alignment of the forms used for students with allergies and ensuring alignment with recent revisions to ADFRD regarding nursing and health plans. So some of that talk has been, how do we make sure if the parent tells the cafeteria manager about the allergy but doesn't tell the school nurse, how we're making sure that we're letting both teams know on both sides to converse with each other and make sure everyone has the correct forms filled out that they need in order to have the child come to school and be safe. Next slide. So for the engagement plan, this is a tier 1 policy with minor updates, technical changes, and or changes required by law. It is posted on City Schools website for public feedback. In addition, we will reach out to the following stakeholder groups: the Equity Advisory Committee, Charter and Operator-led Schools, Parent and Community Advisory Board, Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City, the Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee, school operators, labor unions, including BTU and Pizzazza, as well as the Principal Advisory Group. Next slide. So we came to Policy Committee today. We will go to first reader on February 17th and plan to go to second reader on March 17th. Next slide. That concludes this presentation, and I will now take any questions that anyone has.
Thank you. I'll open up to other commissioners for questions. Hearing none.
I will just thank you for I appreciate your thoroughness. Also, you are consistently thorough when I think about Narcan and all of the other incredibly important things that you are thoughtful for. As a family member of someone with severe anaphylactic allergies, I'm relieved. And I think the next thing is always just, how does this look like in implementation at different schools? And so I think for you, I think the question is actually probably for you, is just, is there things that are mindful that the board should be aware of in terms of the implementation of supporting staff in implementing this policy? But thank you for your work. It's very thoughtful.
No problem. So as I mentioned, this is just another nasal spray as it relates in the grand scheme of things in schools. And we also haven't had a lot of families at this time opt out to add in it. I think most people are more comfortable with the injectable at this point. So we haven't gotten to the place where we're seeing it on a wide scale as of yet. But all of our staff are trained on giving Narcan. This is administered exactly the same way that they would give Narcan.
Sorry, that wasn't to compare the two. Absolutely, I understand.
okay.
But just, the last time I think we saw you presented, just mainly it's like, there is a routine of, I appreciate the thoughtfulness and consideration whenever you come to present and how you prepare. That was unclear on my part.
Thank you so much.
I apologize.
All righty.
But thank you. Thank you for your work. And I have no other questions.
Awesome. Any other questions from any other commissioners? Looks like that's everyone. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And next we have our compliance reports. Do any of the commissioners have any questions regarding JFA residency, non-residency, and tuition, or JFBC informal kinship care?
I had a quick question on the non-residency piece, and it was specifically just curious about, since most of these are Baltimore School for the Arts, I don't know if there's anyone on the call who has expertise in that admissions process. I just had one or two technical questions about that, and those are my only questions.
Sure, I can.
Great. I'm just curious about, for that particular school, since admissions functions so differently than for all of our other schools, whether or not there is a number of students that the school can accommodate that represents a maximum. And so any student who meets the minimum threshold in any of the disciplines can get in, or I guess so I guess there's two options the way that I see it. Either they can accommodate as many as meet the bar, and that's how they take every year, or there's just a number that they hit. And once they hit that number, they can't accommodate any more students. Does my question make sense the way I framed it?
Well, I'm gonna try to answer and let me know
Okay.
if I hit it. So certainly there's an enrollment projection process that's based on the different programs that BSA would have. Not all of the programs have the same as that particular number. And then certainly as they are going through the auditions and the portfolio and all of those processes, that actually will determine, kind of the students that they take. They conduct their own kind of portfolio and audition assessment. And then they let us at district office know kind of who has been accepted. And certainly, from year to year is based upon actually who's applying, who's in that particular pool. So yes, some of the numbers as a whole, we know how many ninth graders that the school can hold. Certainly they kind of reduce it in terms of how many that each program can support. But ultimately it's based upon the application yield and the demand for particular programs of interest on a year-to-year basis. So the numbers vary a little bit based upon the cohort.
And
Gotcha.
Brandon, if I can jump in
Yeah,
before
great.
Mr. Allinger, I want to add some context to that. So I'm going to reflect back to when I was a commissioner on this board. I was very adamant to understand how students outside of our district would get in over students who were inside of our district, right? And since then, as you've had the school sort of look into that data, the number has drastically dropped on the percentage of kids that are from out of district coming in, because I asked them to examine that more carefully. For programs like acting or stage production, there is probably a wide variety of kids inside the district that could take those seats easily. There are other programs like, let's say, an orchestra program, where if we don't have city school students who play the tuba proficiently, or another instrument, for example, the bass, I'm making these up, but you understand, that would require then additional students coming in to fulfill the orchestra, right? And so since School of the Arts have been examining that, there has been a big reduction. But the charter for that school, when that school was designed, the charter does allow for students across the state of Maryland to attend that school. And so a lot of work we did when we were on the board was around right sizing the tuition, understanding expectations. If we are to allow students coming in from out of district to use that school, that amazing school program. So that was the tuition raised. It hasn't been raised in a few years, but every year we kind of escalated that to make sure we represented the value of what a family would really be getting by going to that school. And so we, again, lots of careful consideration around that. We're open to do more, but their charter and the way it was designed as a school open was to allow kids from around the state to actually attend that school. And we really pushed the school hard to think about, can we fill the school as much as possible with city schools residents? And that's one of the reasons why they offer Twigs as well as a way for pre-preparatory programming for kids to be able to have the experience and exposure than to get into the School for the Arts because they've had that past work. So that's something else that they have done. We also want to make sure we recognize, last statement, that it is a pre-preparatory program, meaning that they are trying to get kids into professions that align with the thing that they've gotten into the school for. And so that's been a little bit of their pushback as we think about sort of who has acceptance to the school and who does not.
Thank you for that. And you're getting right to the heart of why I'm asking the question. I'm really curious about this interplay between this policy that we have that says spots must go to a city school student first, which probably looks different at Baltimore School for the Arts because you got an audition process and because it's written into the charter. Knowing that it is located in Baltimore City, we do want to make sure our students get access to this. And so one of the things when I got on the board and started learning about this that I was most excited about was to hear about Twigs and was to hear about all of the things that we're doing, because we know the talent exists in our own school system to be able to develop it, promote it, and make sure students have an equal shot. The other side of the coin that I'm always interested too is it is a high demand school. Is there more capacity that they're able to take on? Are we having to turn students away because we don't have they could potentially serve them, we don't have the capacity? And that's why I'm very curious about the sort of fine details around, is it that if you take 20 students in visual arts every year, they just have to meet a certain bar, and if only 18 meet the bar, we're only taking 18 this year? Or there are 25 that met the bar, but really our capacity in that particular program is 20, so we're only taking 20. And those are the questions that I'm interested in, because certainly it is a highly sought after school. It's something that we're all very proud of. It is experiencing a great deal of success, and so I just want to make sure as a board member that the conditions are right for it to continue to have success. And if it's in the cards for them to be able to serve more students from within Baltimore and outside of Baltimore, I think that's something we should all be promoting. So that's where my questions are stemming from. And I do recognize that some of those questions are a little bit more technical, and I would, Chief High Cupboard, I would welcome a sidebar conversation with you, since I know you're in the weeds, having been a commissioner and now your expertise in your current role. So maybe we can take that one offline.
Absolutely. And I try not to reference my time as a commissioner, but this one was, as many staff will know, was a passionate one for me, to your point about making sure as many Baltimore City students as possible have access to the best programming that we have available. But I will reach out and we can set up a time, and I'd actually include Director Tillman in the conversation,
Right.
because we right now cannot answer the question about the full capacity. We have a facilities analysis that tells us how many kids, but that's such a specialized piece around the work that they're doing in those different areas and the capacity versus size capacity in the building. So Brandon and I will look into that before we have our conversation, just to learn a little more and be able to answer that more fully.
Great, thank you.
Chair Esposito, I realized I did have a couple of questions around the kinship care.
Sure.
Sorry, I wasn't tracking. I just looking at this, realizing just anecdotally based on my own experience, that seems like a vast underreporting of the number of students who are functionally in kinship care in the district. And I guess if there was someone on the line who to be able to kind of speak to that this is a very specific documentation process for something that you're like organically, if you know a family that's been in this community, you're like, oh, of course grandma does this, like that. There's just that happens much more intuitively in new schools. And I guess just looking at like, there are problems that are worth solving and there are others that you're like, there's a system that works. And so I guess just being able to speak to the fact that this is, I would suppose would be a dramatic underreporting, and is kind of what are some of the unanticipated costs based on that, and is it worth the time and the effort to try to address the documentation error, assuming that that is correct?
Sure. So it's spotlight on me again. So what I will say is
I'm really sorry today.
No problem. So I will say when I look at the district and certainly the work that we do, I would agree with you that it is somewhat underreported. I will say that when we think about JFBC, we're looking at the time of enrollment. So certainly we know that when we think about our children and the circumstances of family, that changes while folks are in school. And certainly at our school level, we have several people at the school base, whether it is the community schools coordinator, the social worker, those individuals in the school that are supposed to be kind of working with families to connect them with the necessary supports. One being kind of the kinship navigator with social services, and then also kind of in documenting and getting the correct document on file so that we know which is the parent or guardian and who we should be talking to, and all of those things that takes place at the school level. So certainly as those situations change, we kind of leave it up to them to kind of help them navigate. And that has required us to really kind of change the way in which we kind of provide professional development. So what we've done when we meet with the enrollment officials, when we meet with the community school coordinators, when we meet with the social workers, is to really kind of embed information about kinship care, both a partnership from not only us as city schools, but also working with the official kinship navigator with the Department of Social Services. And we now have a person that is a specialist that serves as a liaison that sits in Dr. Pate's office that works very closely with us and that particular office to be that bridge to kind of support families as their circumstances are changing. In addition to that, kind of our piece for here is as families are navigating the enrollment process, a lot of times they do not necessarily have the paperwork to support the enrollment. And we don't want documentation to be a barrier for enrolling children to get an education. So that this report kind of represents those that have come through central office and kind of supporting, getting them supported, getting them connected with the Department of Social Services, getting them connected with our school-based supports if they meet one of the 6 qualifying hardship conditions as documented by the state. But certainly this does not include those circumstances at the school level when family conditions are changing.
Thank you so much. And I did notice also, well, I guess, thank you. That's super. I was just thinking through kind of anticipating testimony, I believe, as in terms of students who are separated from their guardian for immigration would go through the separate documentation process in the packets that are being distributed now. Is that correct? Or would they also be eligible for?
That is correct. What I will say is that I do know that we've been called in meetings recently this month to really think about what category, if they were going to be eligible under this particular policy. I do know that they are having those types of conversations at the state level. Decisions have not been made yet that have kind of flown down to the different LEAs in terms of how we are to support with this particular policy. So right now they are kind of in a separate process, but I do think that is forthcoming. Just a matter of whether one of the 6 qualifying hardship conditions will be something that is utilized or if there will be a specific one that is developed to support those students that are dealing with the federal immigration issue.
Thank you so much.
No problem. I will also just take a plug. One of the things, Commissioner, with this particular policy also is thinking about kind of the many doors to enrollment. So certainly, while this captures those that have come through the central office process and kind of represents our mandate to report that out, we do know with us having kind of zoned enrollment, certainly this is taking place at the school level. So that's why the professional development is so key, and making sure that our enrollment officials know what to do and know to contact us when those situations occur so that we can document it. But our data is only as strong on that end as the folks that are able to report it according to the guidance that we've set out.
That's a really helpful connection, and thank you for bringing that home again for the second time today. I think at some point I would appreciate some more when you think about those doors and portals, and also looking at how do we maintain continuity of data as well as services, realizing you're like, that is a line that we will approach but never achieve. I would be curious kind of what's the district and your team's long-term strategy is, and then kind of what are the things, whether that is personnel, whether that is system support, whether that is policy support, from the board that would be useful in being able to do that, because those are serious problems that have large reaching implications, and for you to be able to have continuity in systems to be able to do that is worthwhile. So I would love to follow up at some point about that.
Definitely would love the welcome the opportunity. We've done a lot of preliminary work on that with our partnership with the continuous improvement team. So certainly we have that ready to go. So we'll definitely.
I would love to get that briefing. That would be
Okay.
great. Should I reach out to your team, or what's the best? Or yes, I'll have the board office connect if that's possible.
Sure.
Tomorrow.
Sure.
All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. And next we have public comment.
Yes, Madam Chair, this is Dewana Starrett. I will read the one public comment we received. It is from Franca Mueller-Paz, and it says, "Dear members of the Policy Committee, I'm making a plea in support of the SOMO student testimonies from last week's school board meeting. Please urgently review BCPSS policy JEA, compulsory attendance. Every day that passes, more students are touched by these violent separations. Students need school staff to know how to respond. As soon as possible, please revisit BCPSS policy JEA, compulsory attendance, and add language to number 3, behavioral health of student, that includes students experiencing quote unquote family separation. For example, student absences due to behavioral health needs shall be treated the same as absences due to physical illness or another health need. Behavioral health needs may include the emotional impact of family separation. Family separation may include, but is not limited to, immigration detention, deportation, incarceration, admission to a rehabilitation program, or other serious family disruptions. Absences due to behavioral health needs that last up to 3 consecutive days may be excused by submitting a parent or guardian's note. And please revisit Section B of the same policy, early dismissals, to include immigration-related appointments. For example, for early dismissals, it could read, when a student must leave school early for an appointment, this may include, but is not limited to, medical, dental, mental health, court-related, and immigration-related appointments. School staff shall not require families to disclose specific details of the appointment beyond what is needed to document an excused early dismissal. These are small changes that can be made to BCPSS policy JEA, compulsory attendance, that make it clear to main office staff, attendance office staff, and administrations across the city that they can support students in these difficult moments. Thank you. And that concludes the public comment that we received.
Thank you. Yeah, and I definitely want to thank the folks that submitted that for public comment, or that recommendation to look at JEA. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I'll so we can follow up with folks regarding that, right? Dewana?
Yes, we can. We do not have compulsory attendance on the schedule for this year, but at your, if you would like to modify the calendar, we can. The last time that we visited this policy was in 2022, I believe.
Okay, and I think like just the nature of what's happening, especially because some students were recently impacted, I do think it's urgent. So if we could get that on the calendar as soon as possible, just so that it's clear.
Yes.
Yeah,
I will work with staff and see when we can include it and get back
thank
to you.
you.
Mhm.
Thank you. And that concludes our agenda for today. Our next meeting, the next policy committee meeting will be held virtually on January 27th. We will be looking at policy JICF, Safe Schools Act of 2010, destructive or illegal group behavior, policy IKEA, promotion and retention grades K through 12, and KEB graduation standards, as well as compliance reports, JBA, non-discrimination of students, JBB, sex-based discrimination, JICK, bullying, harassment, intimidation of students, JFB, student enrollment, and JFC, interdistrict student transfer. And as stated at the beginning of the meeting, we do have room for public comment. We have 5 people or groups can sign up for public comment with a pre-recorded video or written remarks the day before the board committee meeting. And if you want to find out more about the policy committee, you can see our policy calendar on the City Schools website. You can also provide feedback at any time and also reach out to us. So do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? And also happy holidays, everyone.
Ames Messenger, so moved.
Thank you.
Second, Reading Lounger. Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you.
Happy holidays. Rest well, everyone, and thank you for your work.
See y'all in 2026.
Absolutely.
Bye, everyone.
Get good rest, everyone.
Yes. Unplug.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.